Dell account executive. I call on the state of California, higher ed, and counties for Northern California. And I am here to introduce our speaker, but just before I do that, and I'm not sure if you all know, Dell has spent literally billions of dollars on security over the last few years. We've purchased quite a few companies that focus on nothing but security. So we can do endpoint security, we can do security on your server environment for things like Active Directory, Exchange, etc. We can secure your network, we can secure your perimeter, and even data out into the cloud. So endpoint to the cloud. We have more information at our booth out there right by the registration desk. But what you're here for today is to listen to John Milburn, who is our Dell Executive Vice President and General Manager for our Dell Software Security Group. He loves to have his presentations be interactive, so ask lots of questions, or he's going to ask you questions. And his topic is, who has my data and how did they get it and how do I protect it now? So thank you very much.
Wow. You guys need to lower your expectations significantly. Hi. This is midway through day 2 of this event. Is that a fair thing? You guys have seen a lot of presentations and gotten to learn a lot of stuff, hear a lot of talks. To break that up a little bit, I thought I'd do this presentation for the next 45 minutes through the medium of interpretive dance. Is that acceptable? Just want to see if anybody was listening. Okay, day 2, we're still here. Thank you. Chris, you can keep the scarves back there. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way. We're going to spend the next 35 minutes talking about something that's near and dear to my heart around data governance, data security. My guess is the fact that you're sitting here means that in your organizations, your entities, you have data. Is that a fair guess? Okay. I can do a cartwheel if you guys don't talk. Here's our perspective at Dell Security. It's all about the data. That's a bold statement, but at the end of the day, this is what IT security is there to secure. It's not necessarily the platforms, it's not necessarily the applications, it's not necessarily the devices that people are carrying around with them, although we all get to spend lots of time worrying about all that stuff. It's the data that will keep your name out of the paper. If you have a handle on the data, you won't see your organization talked about in a negative way in the newspaper. Is that a fair summary? The slide on the screen is meant to illustrate the journey that we've all gone through as IT professionals over the last decade or so, as we've gone from mainframe to client server to distributed to this crazy mess that we are in today with BYOD, applications in the cloud, etc. We have spent, both on the vendor side and on the IT, on the customer side, a lot of time trying to secure the individual platforms or on-ramps to get to the data. I have a firm belief that we are running a race that, while important, we will never be able to effectively keep up. It's like a treadmill, like from the Jetsons, that you'll never be able to stop, because there's going to be more places for the data to be, more devices used to access it than I can possibly keep up with by focusing on the access points. It really should be focusing on the permissions and who should have rights to the data itself. The access points, while important, I don't believe are as important as the data. You guys all mildly nodded when I asked if you had data. The scope of data out there in the world is growing a bit. In 2009, we had 0.8 zettabytes. Trivia question, anybody know what a zettabyte is? Okay, I'm gonna try to break this up. What did the fish say when it swam into a brick wall? Damn! Because it's a, never mind. Whew, okay. A zettabyte A zettabyte is 1 order of magnitude beyond a petabyte. So 2009 we had 0.8. In 2020 we'll have 35 zettabytes of data out there in the world. That's a lot. At the same time, there's all this advanced persistent threats, malware, there's all kinds of insidious things being created and being recognized every day. Lots of statistics there. Why do I have the malware stuff up here in a discussion about data? Anyone want to guess? Oh, come on. What was that? What was that, Cheryl? Oh my gosh, thank you. We have lovely parting gifts for the rest of you. Yes, malware is created to get the data. Now, oftentimes it has an intermediate step where it's going after someone's credentials and then goes after the data that that account credentials it has rights to. Lots of this causes breaches. So the average cost of an individual breach, this is both commercial and public sector, $5.4 million. Now you'll see a different figure there. That's per individual record. That's nice. $5.4 million, the average breach, what it cost that organization, $6.5 billion as a country in 2011, we spent cleaning up after breaches. You guys know all this? All right. This is a problem. So what are we supposed to do? This is something that I'm going to break the first rule of being a vendor almost immediately. This is something that's not solved entirely by any sort of technology. This is a people, process, technology type problem. So for the rest of this, we spent about 3 years, well actually about 5 years, trying to help customers get their hands around this particular problem. How do I find out? And here, after thousands of customers, here are the best practices that we've learned help the most. It's a journey, not a destination. Get us closer to right as it comes to getting our hands around this bucket of stuff we have in our environment. The first is find out what you have, because I promise you, you don't know. I promise you, you don't know. If you do, I hope you're hiring, because I'm looking for a job. There's just the ability for users to copy and paste and create Word files, Excel files, etc., and store them anywhere. It's just, it's a race that's very difficult to catch up. So we're going to do our best to find out what's out there, focusing on the stuff that I believe is the most at risk, and we'll talk about some of that. We'll put a process in place for new data. This is where, what are those people called that use the devices? Your customers, the users, have to be lockstep with you. I have to put a process in place that everyone understands that as I create new data, here are the rules that keep us and our names out of the paper. And I'll give some examples as we go through that. Then we put the controls in place to make sure that everybody is looking at the same things, and more importantly, everybody has the same definition of what right looks like. That is a very important step. And then we continually educate, and we lather, rinse, and repeat. This is sort of the circle of data governance. Find out what you have. In my experience, structured data, data that's in applications or databases, is usually easier to get a handle on than the stuff that comes after the unstructured data. So we'll focus more on getting your hands around the stuff that may be in SharePoint, maybe in filers, it may be things that I copied and pasted out of some structured data application into a PowerPoint, into a spreadsheet, into a Word document, whatever it might be, and maybe on desktops, filers, all over the environment. 5 o'clock, do you know where your data is? The answer is probably not. There could be Social Security information, credit card information, health information, all the things that as IT professionals we know we're supposed to be mitigating the risk of. So step one is crawl the data. I live in Texas, that's my pickup truck. You like that? This can be done a thousand different ways. There's COT solutions. There's a lot of open source scripts and things that go out there. But there's really three important things in this that I want to talk about. Knowing what data is out there, and specifically if I deem it as critical or risky. So there are all kinds of solutions out there that will look at the file, look at the contents of these files, some sort of regular expressions to validate. Are these the type of data in these documents, in these slideshows, and in these Excel spreadsheets that I should care about? That's one part of crawling the data. Part two is figuring out who has rights to the data. Why do you care about that? You're not allowed to answer anymore. Who has rights to the data is what we're going to be focusing on as soon as we figure out what's out there, because as long as I'm limiting it to the smallest number of people necessary, I've significantly changed the risk for all that malware and stuff that's out there trying to get users' credentials. The third part of this, and this is one that's often overlooked, is I want to get a sense of who's using the data. So it's what data's out there, what's in there, who has rights to it, and who's using the data. The using the data is one that is often overlooked, but that helps you in a couple ways. As we go further through this process, hopefully you'll agree with me that it's important. So knowing what stuff is out there, what sort of sensitivity and documentation might be in there, knowing who is using it is important, because it is my goal, and it should be your goal, to define owners for all the data sets. And oftentimes, just seeing the permission list is not going to get you to the ownership of that. Why do you care about who owns it? Well, I'll do this. It's been 20 years since I had a real job, but I'm going to take the Wayback Machine and talk about it. I worked in IT for what is now Bank of America, but then it was 5 different bank names ago. And we had an unstructured data problem even then, even though we weren't in the zettabytes world. And the way we handled permissions for data was somebody saw something they wanted access to on some share out there. Usually they didn't even say share in those days. They said on the L drive, And they would call the help desk, and the help desk would say, okay, here, I'm going to give you rights to that. Anybody have experience like that? Is that the way your organizations do that? Is that the right group of people to be deciding who has access to what data? Absolutely not. And that is, if I had a dream, I'm going to paraphrase from a greater person, it would be that IT, our goal is to define what right looks like, but let the business person, the agency person who has the most to do with that data actually be deciding who has rights and access to what. IT is the furthest away from knowing what's in that and who should have rights. Is that a fair assessment? The other thing that data owners can help me do is if I have a good idea of who owns a bucket of data, I can then correlate that with who these people are, and by that, I get a better sense of where I should start. So again, we've come up with some automated process to help me crawl the data. I've got hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes, petabytes throughout my organization. I've got that same process defining who has rights to stuff, and also trying to help me discern who owns the data so that I can do this, which is figure out where I start in this mess. Because you're going to have a lot of stuff in your environments. And you don't necessarily need to be doing this cycle and this hygiene and this rigor that we're talking about for all of it. You certainly can't start as one big mountain of stuff. You have to pick a place to start, and it has to do with, to me, 2 things. It has to do with whatever you found, if you had some sort of ability to crack open the files, and there's tons of applications out there that'll do that to help me look for credit cards, healthcare, social security numbers, that stuff. But also, who is owned the data helps me prioritize. In other words, if there are doctors that own it, it's probably a higher risk than if there's a bunch of administrators that own a bucket of data, or maybe not, depending on your agency. If there is finance or payroll or accounts payable it might have a different level of risk than other groups in your environment. And so I correlate what type of data is in there, who is using it, and help make some sort of heat map and prioritize where I should start with this mess of validating that the people who can be using this stuff should be using it. That's step one. Step two is put a process in place, and I did let them use my desk for this. I have a handle on what's out there. I have a map for where I'm going to start doing forensics and make sure that I know that everything's going where it should. But every second, I mean, while you guys are in here, there are people creating data in your respective organizations, saving it wherever they want, acting all crazy. I mean, the cat's away, right? Those mice are playing. So we need to put a process in place to be sure that we know that we've got our hands around not only what we have, but what's going to be newly created. New data is constantly being created. The key here is control, and user training and buy-off. Excuse me. You need to have a defined policy of when data gets created, where it's stored, what sort of naming conventions for the container for that data is, so we can start the process of being a little less willy-nilly on where we store things and where things are creative. The second one, in my experience, is the most important on this slide, and that's put some sort of classification in place for your users at the time of creation. Do any of you work somewhere where you're doing that voluntarily? As I create a Word document, as I send an email, as I do XYZ, I have to pick a level of risk and security for that data? No. Okay. I've seen a number of organizations do this, and at our small organization in Round Rock, Texas, we rolled this out about a year ago as well, and it really helps significantly get our hands around this problem. So, I probably spend 3 months figuring out what I have, and then just a couple weeks training the users to here's the way we're going to store and classify information, so I don't have to go through that arduous crawling process every single week or month. So put classification, create a culture of security, train your users, and again, assign data owners based on what groups they're in and who's using the data. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Data owners are important, so I know what group they come from and where the risk is. They're equally important for this second part, which is I want the owners to agree who should have access to what, not IT, not the help desk, not anything. So every bucket of data, as I lay out my process and my classification scheme, I equally want to lay out a scheme where every container has a owner for that container, and there is a quantified, easy-to-use process for people to ask that person, can I have access here? And that person can approve, deny, and then regularly attest to that transaction. So I hate to say this, but you're right. Although I will add, it's usually not tight control in the commercial sector either. I think I guess the grass is always greener. You absolutely need both. You need that, and part of figuring out what's out there and who's using it and doing that is so IT can define what right looks like. And you put the rules in place to say, even if this business owner is saying give it out, and there's a million ways to enforce these rules, if this, or this is in there, or this, and this happens, somebody in this group can't give rights to this group because there's separation of duty type things. I define what right looks like. I can deny them all day long and flag that. So you do need both. Agreed. Thank you for talking. So step 3 is control, and I have a wonderful quote on the screen around governance from CIO.com. It says blah, 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 blah. Aligning IT with the business, making sure we all do all that stuff. You guys use the word governance a lot? Hear it a lot? Yeah. That's one official definition. From my perspective, I'm from Texas, right? So those are big words. As it comes to data, it's making sure that the right people have the right access, but only the right people have the right access to the right resources, and that the owners or the right people know what's going on. Sorry, I'm not supposed to stand there. And they're saying it's okay on a regular basis. That's what data governance is. So it's easier said than done, but we've talked about most of this already. It's making sure that I know what's out there, who's using it, who the owners are, making sure that I have an automated access request system set up so that I can define what right looks like and let the business people or people closer to that decision make the decisions of yes and no, but also have the audits point back to that review or regular attestation for those individual business owners. Again, we start with the high-risk things and we work our way through this. This is one of the top 5 audit findings today, are people not having any sort of governance on data, unstructured data that is perceived to be sensitive or classified. So going through this will get us closer to whole. So this is a nice graphic, the circle of data governance, circle of life, which outlines 3 steps that we've talked about so far. Identify and clean up, crawl the data, figure out who has rights, who define owners, and start to clean up any things that smell wrong. Audit and assign, that means assign data owners to containers, train them on the policies, and then have request an automated system that people can request and be approved or denied access to newly created data. And then via some sort of automated process have regular attestations, and those attestations, should they find things that are wrong, go back and clean up the appropriate permissions to make sure it matches what IT believes is right. And then you don't like that. Okay. No, I mean, you but I mean, so, do you mind me asking what university? Okay. Okay, and that's true for medical facilities as well. I mean, traditionally doctors or lawyers or whatever don't like to be told what to do. And the honest truth is, in my own organization, there's a lot of very important, very successful people that don't like to be told what to do either. This is, I guess, the last part, and this is where I said let me go back. Sorry. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. I'll stay here for a second. If you don't have that buyout, if you don't have a culture of security, and I mean, I know organizations, including my own, that we have a quarterly attestation, not just the data I own and who has rights to it, but also that I understand and will comply with the policies that my organization. I get it, there are people that are easier to lead than others. That's part of the defining the rules and who can do this and what those policies are. But education and buy-in has to happen, and quite frankly, what I found the best thing to happen is the next time there's a breach in the public, talk about it. Talk about the Snowden, talk about Home Depot, talk about all those things. If you get that communication going, people need to understand that as an individual user, as a faculty member, as whatever, I am part of the stewardship of the data. So we do the circle of life. If I do this, and if I organizationally can perform these steps in the circle, I keep the bad guys out for the most part simply by keeping the good guys good. And that means I am reducing my attack surface if I know exactly that there's not buckets of data that thousands and thousands of people have rights to when only 10 should have right. Yes? No? And finally, this is where we've been going. This is not an afterthought. This is probably the most important. The best technology, the best processes, the best controls, all of this will fail if your users aren't bought in. If there hasn't been an event or a top-down edict, this is going to be a difficult thing to happen. But you can go back with more education from forums like this, with watching the newspapers, with talking to your peers and seeing how they got this done. This is a real problem. This is one of the last problems that we've sort of let go over the last 10 years. We have all kinds of great web security, perimeter protection, all this good stuff, but being able to get our handle around the gigabytes, petabytes, zettabytes of data that are in my organization, it's critical, and the users are a big part of it. Yes? No, that is an important point. You're never going to get the users on board unless we can show them that this is actually accelerating their ability to do their job, as opposed to just another thing IT security is telling me to do that's keeping me from liking this job. IT security is one of the top 3 things people say is keeping them from getting the most use out of IT. Yeah, that's exactly right. But, yes. And I agree, although I'm hearing your voice in my head. If I have faculty people that can't be fired, that makes it more difficult. So that's the stick. Use that actually. That's good. Sticks are good, but carrots are good too. I'd be willing to bet those same. I'll use faculty members, but all of you have different people that you're thinking of. Would get on board if you showed them an easy way to go out and ask for access to stuff they need, as opposed to not knowing where to go. And usually there's a clumsy process that involves the help desk and all that. If you set up some user-friendly, like Amazon.com, for here's a bunch of stuff, here's who owns it, do you want access, yes or no, and show them that you're actually enabling them to do their jobs better, there's a carrot there as well. But thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Cheryl. Well, there's always people that, I mean, so you're, that's good. That's good. I mean, I have had to change my debit cards 3 times this year, because we do a lot of shopping at Home Depot, Target, and all that. I guarantee your users have done the same. So there are real world events that can get this dialogue going. But we do, the onus is on us to focus where the risk really is, not try to boil the ocean, and also make something easier in the process. And usually it's that access request automation that does that. But I would imagine that at your institution, the intellectual property is even more sensitive and more the competitive differentiator, for lack of a better expression, than many commercial businesses. So it's part of the, I mean, I get it. It's part of the conversation. Okay. Well, guys, thank you. I have more bad jokes, but you guys look done. Thank you.